This is the test. This is a test. Testing, testing.
So, good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's Planning, Development and Control Committee. It's Wednesday, the 19th of April, and currently 9:30. I think all the information that you need to know as an audience has been on the screen, but I will repeat just the main points. Please could you make sure that your mobile phones are turned off or on silent. We're not expecting a practice fire drill today. So if you hear the fire alarm, then that's for real. Please follow the instructions of the fire officer. The assembly point is in Abbey Gardens. I'm Therese Evans. I'm chair of the planning committee, and the councillors are seated around the tables on either side with their names in front of them. In addition, we have Julie Pinnock, who is head of what are you head of, Julie? The title keeps changing.
Yeah, I'm the service lead for built environment.
Thank you. And Lorna Hutching, who's planning manager, and our legal representative, Daniel Lucas. The case officer, and the first case officer is Megan Osborne, always sits there. And Claire Buchanan is taking the minutes today, and if you've got any administrative problems, she will sort them out for you. So I will go now to the agenda. Apologies, deputy members.
Thank you, Chair. No apologies for absence have been received. All members are present. Thank you.
Thank you. Any disclosures of interest? Councillor Pearson.
It's yes, I'm expecting an important phone call at lunchtime from a local hospital, and I can't switch, so I have to keep my phone on.
Okay.
It should be at 1:30. It shouldn't interrupt proceedings, but just in case,
Yes.
I may suddenly get
Thank
up
you
and
for
rock
your
it out.
explanation.
That's the reason.
Thank you. No expressions of interest, though. Minutes of the previous meeting, those are on our pages 9 to 16. Are those agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. And then we all have an update sheet in front of us. Can we accept the update sheet as an addendum to today's reports?
Agreed.
Thank you. And so we will move on to the planning applications themselves. The first one is Beechwood. And I'll just find the right page here. It's demolition of, no demolition, sorry. Erection of 2 new dwellings, each with integral garage on land to the rear of Beechwood, including minor modifications to existing access onto Worthy Road, together with parking, landscaping, and associated works. This is case number 22/02811/FUL, and it's Beechwood, Worthy Road, Winchester, Hants. The case officer is Megan Osborne, and when you're ready, Megan, we're ready to hear your report.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me all right? The application site is located to the west of Worthy Road, within the city of Winchester. Opposite the site are houses on Abbots Barton, and to the north is Holly House and Cedar Cottage. To the corner of the site, at the rear end, is the corner of Brendan Care, and to the rear of the site is 6 Salcott Place, and to the south is the houses on Abbey Hill Close. The proposal is to retain the existing dwelling and have an access along the northern side of the dwelling to access the 2 proposed properties to the rear. House 1, which is the first one next to the existing property, is to be a 3-bedroom property with an integral garage, and house number 2 is proposed to be a 5-bedroom dwelling. There is currently a garage to the side of the existing dwelling house, to the northern side in between the house and Holly House, which has an application that has previously been permitted to remove this garage and replace it with a garage to the front of this dwelling. There was, on the original application, there was a proposal to put a double garage to the front of house 2. However, this has been removed during the application, the process. Just talk you through the floor plans. So this is floor plans for house number 1. It's 3 bedrooms. There a bedroom over the garage to the side there. Integral garage. And this is the floor plans for house 2. It's got 4 bedrooms on this first floor. Then you go up to the loft space, and there's a bedroom up to the loft space with the bathroom. And these are the floor plans. So going back to house 1, the front elevation to the top left-hand side of your screen, and the rear to the bottom left-hand side, and then the side elevations either side. And then this is the elevations to house number 2. This is the larger one of the 2. It's for 5 bedrooms. This shows a section of the proposal. So if you're looking at the side of the existing property, looking south, as you can see, there is a slope to the site. So you've got the existing property and then the proposed garage to the front of this. And then you've got house number 1, house number 2, and then to the rear of that is 6 Salcott Place. So you can see the level changes on this section here. And a section going the other way, so this is looking north. At the right hand side you've got the existing property, and then you've got house number 1 and house number 2, and you can see the sloping site goes up the site to the rear to Salcott Place at the rear there. And this is another section looking west. So you've got 6 Salcott Place to the rear here, and this is section 3, house number 2. And on the left-hand side of the screen, you've got 4 Abbey Close. And on the right-hand side, you've got Brendan Care. I'll show you a close-up of this in a minute. And then you've got a section, a close-up section of house number 1 in relation to the existing property. So this gap is a gap of 3.4 metres in between the properties. And then you've got a section of house number 2, and to the right hand side of the screen is 6 Salcott Place. And this is a gap of approximately 6 metres in between, but you can see the level changes in between the 2 properties. And this is a close-up of the section we've seen before again. So to the left hand side of your screen is 4 Abbey Hill Close. And to the right hand side is house number 2. So you can see the distances, that's 25 metres approximately between dwelling to dwelling, and 14 metres to the boundary from the proposed dwelling, house number 2. So a few photos. This is the existing dwelling. The next one shows the driveway a bit closer. We're going up to the property, Beechwood. And then you can see the existing trees at the front of the site. This is standing in the rear garden looking at Beechwood to the right hand side of the screen, and in the middle there is Holly House there to the side. This is standing in the rear garden again with Beechwood there to the left hand side of your screen looking to the other direction, and you've got Abbey Hill Close, I think that's number 5, no it's number 5, and then you've got views out towards Winner beyond. This is number 5 Holly Hill Close, sorry. No, Abbey Hill Close, sorry. And then to the right hand side, you can see the roof of number 4 Abbey Hill Close, standing in the garden of Beechwood. And this is going around again. So this is the roof of number 4 Abbey Hill Close. And to the right, you can just see number 6 Salcott Road. This is taken from number 4 Abbey Hill Close. So this is the rear window looking out towards the site. And you can see they've got a very high hedge and some trees, and there is a gap between them. And this is looking from the window again towards Salcott Place. So to the right is where we were looking before, over this hedge. This is looking out one of the other windows. You can see the rear garden and then the hedge, and then the proposed development would be here. There is a 25-metre gap from property to property. And this is standing in the ground floor of that property, looking at the boundary to that site. This is the view from standing at the rear of Beechwood up to 6 Salcott Road. You can see the level changes. And this is 6 Salcott Road. And they've got high fence along their boundary between the properties. And this is standing in 6 Salcott Road, looking towards the site behind this fence. And again, you can see the very top of Beechwood. And this on the left-hand side is Brendan Care, so that's in the very top corner of the site. And the boundary that runs along, you can see in front of you, is the boundary with Holly House. This is standing in the garden of Holly House, looking towards the site. It's considered the proposal for 2 dwellings on the site is acceptable. The size of the site can accommodate the 2 dwellings with sufficient space surrounding them, that this would not result in a detrimental impact on the character of the surrounding area, existing building, or neighbouring amenities. Therefore, in my recommendation is to permit this application subject to conditions as set out in my report and the changes of the wording to the conditions as set out in the update sheet. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. We move now to public speaking. And the first public speaker is David Whitmarsh, who's an objector. Good morning. At the bottom of the microphone, you'll find there's a button to press, and then a red light will come on. You have 3 minutes. I will have to stop you if you're still going after 3 minutes.
I understand.
And then the screen will show you the countdown of the 3 minutes. So when you're ready, please start.
I'm here to speak on behalf of the objectors who live in the properties immediately adjacent to the boundaries of the site. We do not oppose the construction of a dwelling or dwellings on the site, but we have many objections to these proposals. So we wish to focus now on the principal objection affecting all of us, which is that the new houses are unreasonably tall and bulky in relation to the surrounding properties, and that they also introduce an unreasonable level of overlooking of properties in Abbey Hill Close. These following slides will explain why. First slide, please. This is the front elevation of Beechwood House to the east of the site. Please note how the roof of the property is low and the first floor rooms are constructed largely within the roof space. Next slide, please. This is the rear elevation of Holly House to the north of the site. Please note how the roof of the property is also low and the first floor rooms are also constructed largely within the roof space. Next slide, please. This slide shows a 2-storey property in Abbey Hill Close to the south of the site and a similar 2-storey property in Park Close to the north. Please note the low-pitch, modest-scale roofs on both properties. Next slide, please. By way of contrast to the dwellings shown on the previous 3 slides, this is a cross-section drawing of House 2 at the site with House 1 shown in profile. Please note the 3-storey form of House 2 with a steep roof pitch. House 1 is shown to be of a similar height. The proposed houses are much taller than any of the neighbouring houses. Moreover, they are sited on rising ground above these neighbouring properties. Next slide, please. These are cross-section drawings of the proposed site. They show at the lowest point Beechwood and on the highest point the building at 6 Salcott Road. Our view of this drawing is that it demonstrates that the proposed new houses are very close to Beechwood and to the adjacent dwellings to the north and south of the site, and the proposed new houses are overly dominant relative to the neighbouring properties. So in contrast to the relatively low height and bulk of the houses shown on the first 3 slides, please consider the height and bulk of the proposed new houses. Next slide, please. This is a cross-section drawing of, on the left, 4 Abbey Hill Close and on the right, new house H2. The drawing illustrates the unreasonably intrusive lines of sight into 4 Abbey Hill Close. especially from the third story of the new house. In conclusion, please note the new houses will be constructed on ground which rises above the ground level of the existing houses to the north, south and east of the site. Despite this, the height of the new buildings from ground floor to roof ridge is substantially higher than the height from ground floor to roof ridge of any of the surrounding houses. The height of the new houses from ground floor to ridge can and should be reduced. We therefore respectfully ask the committee to refuse permission for the proposed new houses for the reason that their height and bulk represent an unreasonable overdevelopment of the site. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please don't go, because it could be that there are questions of clarification from the committee for you. Would any member like to ask any more questions? Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Chairman. Have you seen the picture on page 42 of the report, which shows the alignment of the roofs, which is going against what you are saying?
May we see that on the screen then? Is it possible to see that on the screen? Page 42 of the...
That is page 42.
Thank you. Sorry, your question?
On page 42, it shows a dotted line across the roofs of all the properties.
Yes, I'm aware.
On either side. What you're saying in your statement is that the two new properties go above that line. So are you indicating that page 42 is incorrect?
No, I'm not suggesting that the two new roof lines go above that line. I do, however, hold the view that that drawing is drawn across to Salcott House on the left, the drawing that we're looking at, which that building in itself has no material detrimental effect on any of the properties that we are concerned about, Beechwood and Holly House in particular. However, it's been used as a target for the line to aim at. And underneath that line that's been drawn, the two new houses do indeed fit, but they are materially closer to Beechwood. And therefore they impact not only on Beechwood, but also the neighbouring property, Holly House, and to the south for Abbey Hill Close. And so that is our contention.
Any more questions? No, so thank you very much, Mr. Whitmore, for coming along today. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
The next speaker is one of the ward councillors, Councillor Kathleen Becker. And Councillor Becker, when you're ready, you have 5 minutes to talk to the committee. So when you're ready.
Thank you. A bit of an echo. Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to be here to speak in relation to this application in support of the neighbouring properties who you've heard from, and a number of whom who are here today. As Mr. Whitmore said, the neighbours do not oppose the construction of these new houses. They understand that it is an appropriate site to be developed, but it is the particular design of these dwellings that makes them feel that they must oppose these applications. As you've heard, the primary concern relates to the height of the proposed houses, as the existing houses, Beechwood, Holly House and 4 Abbey Hill Road, are relatively low slung, with the bedrooms built into the roof line. So they're 2-storey properties, but they are relatively short 2-storey properties, whereas the proposed houses are relatively tall, with the neighbours considering that their height is out of proportion with the neighbouring properties. The proposed roof lines are extremely steep, enabling the up to 3 stories to be constructed. They feel a more sympathetic design would have looked to the designs of the existing properties, particularly Beechwood, and have built the bedrooms within the roof line rather than having the extremely pitched roof that is considered to be out of keeping with the existing houses. As you've heard, they consider that the difference in the roof lines is even more stark with the rising slope that the proposed dwellings to be built on. The combination of the two means that they are the houses are considered to be too tall and out of scale in relation to the existing properties. As you've also heard, there's a concern that the houses will overlook particularly the living areas of 4 Abbey Hill Close. It would be extremely helpful if the committee could go and do a site visit to understand the topography of the site, because it is complex. It does rise in various orientations, and to understand how the proposed dwellings will impact on the neighbouring surrounding properties, because lots of the pictures show the one slope but don't seem to take into account the other slopes that are present on the site. As I mentioned, the residents do not oppose the development of the site, but they do oppose the particular design, so ask that these applications in their current form be declined.
Thank you. Committee, any questions for Councillor Becker? Nope, doesn't look like it. So thank you very much for coming along today. And the final speaker is a supporter and the agent, I believe, Lynn Evans. Good morning. So you have 3 minutes when you're ready. If you could just put the microphone on, great. And when you're ready, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Lynn Evans of LJE Planning Limited, and I'm the agent and planning consultant for the above application. Development is proposed by Dean Lane Winchester. It's part of the Millgate Winchester company, and they have a very strong track record of building very high quality homes which fit into and alongside existing housing in Winchester. This application has come about as a result of very lengthy pre-application discussions, both with your officers and engagement with the neighbours around the site. Proposals did actually start with 4 replacement dwellings, including the demolition of Beechwood, but I think we all actually feel that the solution that's being presented today is a much improved version, retaining Beechwood with 2 new houses to the rear. Perhaps I could just highlight 2 matters. One about the character of the area. This is an established residential area. There is a wide mix of housing, and Beechwood, with its very large plot, is one of the few remaining original properties, and most of the surrounding development has resulted from dividing up or redeveloping previous larger plots. So we're not proposing anything new here, but following the now well-established pattern of how the area has developed. The important point is that Beechwood is to be retained, and from Worthy Road, it will retain its significance, if that's the right word to use, in terms of standing in its own grounds. We're confident that the 2 new houses can be comfortably accommodated, leaving a good amount of garden for Beechwood. We obviously don't feel that they're going to appear out of place. The dwellings step up the hill and very carefully have been cut in and step up the hill, and the sections show clearly how they relate to Beechwood moving up to Salcott Road, and then again in terms of the distances to the properties in Abbey Hill Close. So just dealing with those quickly, number 6 Salcott Road, they're side by side. There's a big change in levels, and we don't feel there'll be any impact on that property in terms of any overlooking or overbearing nature. Numbers 4 and 5 Abbey Hill Close, there is a back-to-back relationship there, but when you look at the substantial distances of say 25 metres back to back, the cutting in, the dropping of the levels and the boundary planting, then we feel that that is acceptable. And Holly House, again, is some distance away in relation to the development. Your office is satisfied with the application, and we hope you will be too. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, any questions for Miss Evans? Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Chair. The pitch of the roof, is it a steeper pitch than other properties on the area?
There's a great variety of houses and house styles, some of them reflecting ages of properties and therefore what was, you know, typical of that era. The way that it has been developed has been in relation to beechwood and looking at the style of beechwood, and that does have some fairly steep gable pitches, and so it's been looking to follow the pattern of beechwood and then stepping into the slope of the land so that it sort of steps up the hill. And 6 Salcott Road, although of a very different style, still will sit higher up the hill. So no, it's not the same as some of the other houses, but say there is a great variety and not one overriding form of development in the local area.
Any further questions? Oh, sorry, Councillor Rotter.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Can I ask about landscaping?
Yes.
We haven't really mentioned landscaping, but I believe there's quite a lot of landscaping planned for this site once the house is built. And could you just talk us through what the aim of the landscaping is, please?
Well, the aim of the landscaping is to do a number has a number of objectives. One is to complement the site in the local area, to add to the attractiveness of the development, both for the enjoyment of the occupiers, but also more strategically to make sure that it is as effective in terms of boundary treatments in relation to the neighbours. And as already the client, the applicant, does sort of engage with neighbouring people. And so there's been some discussion. You'll have seen on the update sheet, there's a change to the boundary planting proposed alongside Holly House. And so, you know, that would be the objective, to engage with neighbours so that they don't just get something imposed upon them, but it's something that's mutually beneficial.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? No. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ms Evans, for coming along today. So Megan, anything you wish to update us on from what you've heard in the public speaking?
Yeah, I just would like to say that this drawing hasn't been verified. Just wanted to bring that to attention of the committee. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we'll move then to our report and start on page 21 with the principle of development. I have asked this question, but I would like to ask it publicly. Could you explain to me, Megan, please, why this complies with our policy CP2, which says the majority should be 2 and 3 beds, and this is 1 3-bed and 1 5-bed.
Yes, our policy CP2 does say majority shall be 2 and 3 bed, and this being 2 dwellings, the majority isn't, it's 50-50 split. But however, it's felt that the character of the area, there is a section within that policy that says if it reflects the character of the surrounding area, then this would be acceptable. And I feel that in this instance, it is acceptable to have 1 3-bed, 1 5-bed.
Lorna, did you want to clarify?
Thanks, Chair. I'm not sure there's too much to clarify other than just to sort of reiterate what Megan said. The policy applies itself much better to, or lends itself to be applied to bigger sites for more houses, because it's asking for a range of tenures and sizes, which is difficult to achieve on a small site for just 2 dwellings. So we have normally taken that to mean that it would be achievable through a 50-50 split.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions on the principle of development? If not, can we move on to the impact of the character and appearance of the area and residential amenities? Councillor Rotter?
Thanks. I noticed on the photograph that the existing house, Beechwood, has got some rather large windows looking towards house number 1, I think it is. And I'm just a bit concerned that those windows are going to be overly overshadowed by house number 1. So could you just reassure me on that point, please?
Due to the nature of the site and the distances between the properties, this would overshadow slightly at certain times of the evening. It's to the west, yeah. However, I don't think it would be detrimental to this property, and it wouldn't result in a material planning harm.
Okay.
Could you, Mr. Atwood was, sorry, I don't know why I've got people's names wrong today. Mr. Whitmarsh was concerned about the height of the 2 dwellings. Could you say whether you feel that there is an impact there?
As I went through the sections, and as you can see in the sections going up the site, I know there is a level change throughout the site. However, as you can see the line that we were discussing earlier, there is a change in the heights as they go up the site. House 1 and house 2 are dug down slightly, and therefore I don't feel that this would be detrimental in terms of the overall bulk and scale of the properties in relation to neighbouring properties.
Thank you. And then Ward Councillor, Councillor Becker, was concerned about the design of the houses. Do you feel that they fit into the surrounding area?
I do. I fit it. I feel that they are in keeping with, especially with the existing property at Beechwood. And as it was mentioned, there is a vast variety within the surrounding area. And I feel that this design is in keeping with the vernacular.
Thank you. Sorry to keep asking questions. Then on page 22, the second paragraph, it talks about the amount of vegetation, and I can see that there is a lot of screening from the current vegetation. But I couldn't see, and forgive me if I'm wrong, I couldn't see in the conditions a condition to ensure that that vegetation stays, the screening.
So there was a landscaping condition 7, that asked for a detailed landscaping scheme to be submitted before the proposal is first built and occupied. And this should be adhered to. There are existing trees in the site. Some of them are TPO towards the front especially, and there are proposed new planting schemes, especially towards the north on Holly House on that boundary for bleached hedging. And there's some proposed trees along the boundary of Selcott Road as well.
Thank you. I think that's the end of my questions. Anyone else got Councillor Reid?
Thank you, Chair. On page 39, it shows the driveway is going to be altered, if I'm reading this correctly. If you look at page 46, it shows the existing driveway, which appears to be straight. This has obviously got a loop in it, and it undercuts one of the TPO trees, and I'm just wondering about its construction.
As far as I'm concerned, the existing driveway, the first part of it,
Yes,
doesn't change. The driveway access point has been assessed by Hampshire County Council Highways, and they accept the proposals. And also in terms of the impact to the trees, our tree officer has assessed this and been out on site a number of times, and considers it to be acceptable in relation to those TPO trees.
Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of points of clarification. Firstly, I think I heard from Mr. Whitmarsh a figure of 25 metres. I wonder if you could clarify the distance between the rear of the proposed two houses and the houses in Abbey Hill Close. And a second question, within that distance, there's a proposal for a bleached lime hedge. And if I remember correctly, one of the written objections was to that particular form of boundary on the grounds, I think, that it grows very large and imposes maintenance obligations on both sides. I just wondered if you could clarify whether that is, in your view, the most appropriate solution.
Yes, in relation to Holly House, the distances between house number 1, so the nearest point at house number 1, and the boundary with Holly House is 12 metres, and house number 2, setbacks slightly further from the boundary, is approximately 14 metres to that boundary with Holly House. There is a proposed bleached hedge along that boundary. This has been altered as a request from the resident of Holly House to change the species of this plant, and I believe it will form screening along that boundary.
I got confused, didn't I? I was thinking that that hedge was between the rear of the houses and the houses in Abbey Hill Close. So could I just ask you to clarify the distance between the rear of H1 and 2 and the Abbey Hill Close houses?
Yes, sorry. The distance between the houses on Abbey Hill Close. So between house number 2 and house number 4, there is a distance from house to house of 25 metres. And from house number 2, the rear of house number 2 to the boundary, the rear boundary is 14 metres approximately.
Thank you. Any further questions? So the next section is the South Downs National Park, but there doesn't seem to be any issues with the national park. So if not, there is quite a bit on the historic environment, because this has been listed as a non-designated heritage asset, which was requiring a pre-application, which the applicant undertook. So there being no questions on that, and sustainable transport, we'll move on then to page 24 of our report, to the ecology and biodiversity. Could I start? I'm delighted to see that my long-term support of the Swifts has finally hit the report. And could I be assured that there will be hedgehog highways as well? I know there are spaces under the trees, but I think it's very important in vanishing species that we ensure that we give them the best chance to survive.
There is a condition to condition the ecology report that has been submitted, condition 15, and there's condition 16. I will have to double check that the hedgehog information is in that. I will.
Chair, it does, on condition 16, it does require the addition of gaps under fences,
Okay.
which I believe is for hedgehogs.
Oh yeah, it does. Sorry about that.
Good.
It does. 16.
Thank you. Sustainability, any questions on that? Councillor Ashwell?
Thank you, Chair. I just wondered if the proposed developments are going to have any solar panels?
As you can see on this proposal, house number 2 has solar panels on the side slope of the property. and house number 1 has it on the other side.
Yep, that's fine, thank you.
Councillor Leaning.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a quick question. Is there proposed to be a gas connection to these houses? Yeah.
I don't think there will be, but it's not material to the planning decision today.
Lorna, did you-
No, but I'm looking at sustainability.
Lorna?
It's not necessarily a material consideration. We don't have that level of information in our planning applications, so we wouldn't necessarily know that.
It has to meet the sustainability credentials as set out in policy CP11, and that has been conditioned in the report.
Councillor Pearson, did you want to ask a question? Okay. So that brings us to the end of the sections in the report, unless anyone's got a question on the condition. It's got a question on sustainability. Okay.
Yes,
the answer.
referring actually to conditions which are part of sustainability, and I'm asking, I've not seen quite this detail about this in conditions 12 and 14, which are on page 29, where you refer there to the amount of water, 110 litres per person per day, right? Which is a bit worrying because Southern Water calculates we're using on average 160 and 170 litres per day. Now, okay, we're trying to cut down the use of water, but how are we going to deal with that? I mean, is this water going to be rationed going into these two houses? Is the proposal to use grey water, in which case it's not mentioned in this section? You know, and 14, where you talk about the water efficiency calculator, 110 litres per person per day shall be consumed with the development. So are you saying there's a water meter involved? And how is that going to be done? Or is this an unreasonable expectation on two houses within Winchester District? Or are we going to see this in future for every new house? Because I don't recall this sort of detail before in conditions for new houses. So can you explain? I know it's a technical question, Megan, but I assume you know something about it. It's a condition you've written down.
It is a standard condition that has been put on any new dwelling for a number of years now. And we require a water report to state that they will be using X amount of water, and they have to be under that certain amount, and all the houses manage it. So it's pre-construction and then pre-occupation that they have to submit that information. And there's a number of different ways that they will be doing that, but all new houses have to do this now.
Calculations are desktop studies. Now, to get those calculations, I am assuming there are no baths, only showers. That's one point. Second point, there must be use of grey water in order to, we do not use fresh water to flush our toilets, which is, which implies a tank in the roof. Okay, I guess that's building regs rather than planning, but nonetheless, it's an implication of condition that we are proposing for this. And on the face of it, it strikes me as being completely unreasonable, unless there's some way we could check up on this. I mean, okay, 110 litres per person per day. Hold it, you're using 112. You can't have, you're going to shut your water off. Is this what we're proposing?
Chair, just to reiterate how the questions work, the first question is more of a desktop exercise, and the level of information comes in is highly detailed, testing things like the equipment and the utilities. So they will have like water flow restrictions on toilets, smaller baths, smaller sinks, all of these, sort of every component part of the house is designed to reduce water flow and to perform in a sustainability exercise. And we've got used to dealing with these fairly standard design assessments that come in now. So we see sort of time after time the same ways that people would design houses to meet this. And then the second condition is a way that once the house is then constructed, it's tested, has it actually delivered what that first condition wanted? And so that's how we sort of make sure it's sort of held to account for what the design and the desktop assessment wanted it to do. And we work with our sustainability consultant where we need to really look at this. And the architects and agents are quite used to delivering this now, which is only going to get much more stringent in our emerging local plan. So they're I'd say that they're quite used to designing in this way. And it's only going to get tougher for everybody to deliver houses that have very high levels of sustainability for energy and water use. So yes, it's reasonable and it's conditioned through the planning system in that way.
I presume we give permission for a neighbouring house to have a swimming pool. They must be using a great deal more than 110 litres per person per day.
I mean, somebody could go in their garden and just switch the hose.
Well, I mean,
but the house, as much as it can be designed,
theoretical thing. What I'm trying to say is, how are you going to make sure that what we are saying there is actually going to be met without being completely unreasonable? That basically is my question. But if we can't do that, then we shouldn't have that condition.
I think, Councillor Pearson, you could say the same about any of the conditions. They are conditions and they're legal conditions, and we expect them to be met.
There are no conditions of such a nature. Sorry, this condition of this sort in my house, or even though I've got a water meter, but I've never been told this figure, and yet we're saying this now in this sort of detail. I don't understand why suddenly this is coming up unless it's detailed in building regs.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. It is not recent. It aligns with our current local plan, which was adopted in 2013 and 2017, respectively, for Part 1 and Part 2. It's in policy CP11. It sets out the requirements for all new housing development to meet, and it was the Code for Sustainable Homes at that time, which was level 4 for water and level 5 for energy, which is set out in our policy. And these conditions are reasonably standard since that time for developers to achieve these sort of water savings. Obviously, Code for Sustainable Homes doesn't exist in that way now, but we can measure that through the target emission rates, and it's pre and post construction. But you're right, we then can't manage the habits of householders in the future. But what we can do is we can make our best endeavours now to ensure that developers are building houses that are fit for the future. So that is a reasonable condition in terms of this, and it's part of our policy, and it's something we've been routinely doing since the inception of this policy, Chair. Hope that helps. Thank you.
So in that case, we really should raise the profile of this, so should the water companies, because in the face of it, in the present state, yeah, I know Southern Water is having problems supplying water, as indeed Portsmouth, indeed most water companies are. So are we therefore building too many houses?
Councillor Rutter, you wanted to?
That's, I mean, it's a never-ending job, Chair. I'm quite prepared to drop it at that point. But I'm quite prepared to drop it at that point, having raised the issue. So, you know.
No, I understand your concern, but I'm not too sure that this is the right arena right now.
Exactly.
But Councillor Rutter.
No, my point was covered by.
Okay. So if we've finished the questions, debate. Councillor Rutter.
Thank you, Chair. I can quite understand the concerns of near neighbours, because it's always difficult having new houses built just on the other side of your garden fence. But I think in this case, the developer and the city officers have done their very best to make sure that what is proposed is going to be acceptable at the end of the day. They've taken pre-application advice. The original idea of knocking down the big house and putting in 4 new houses has gone away, thank goodness, and we're retaining Beechwood, which is a house full of character and full of Winchester-ness, which I think is something that that first arose in central Winchester, but actually is true of the suburbs as well, and Worthy Lane in particular. In fact, you won't see the new houses from Worthy Lane behind Beechwood, but they will be there. I agree that they may feel a bit high, but actually in the complete setting of the area where they're going to be built, they are not unduly high, and I don't accept that point from the residents, but I can understand your concerns. I'm sure that the comprehensive conditions that are being put on these two new homes will ensure that the most possible mitigation is put in place. So, you know, landscaping, and I'm sure that they're going to be considerate developers and so on. I was concerned about cycle storage, but actually, of course, there are built-in garages, so that people will be able to be completely sustainable and either catch the bus into Winchester or cycle along the cycle route, which hopefully will be significantly improved in the next few years anyway. The permitted development rights, which other homes have, which are quite extensive these days, have been removed from these two new houses. So any extra building that they'd like to see on those houses would have to come through the planning process. So that gives you confidence that that nothing untoward is going to be added on once the houses are built. So I think I do understand that developers have a temptation to squeeze in the biggest possible houses onto sites, and that happens across the district. And I'm afraid it's the modern way. It's what we have to live with, and we on the planning committee have to find real planning reasons to object to anything, because it would just go straight to appeal and be straight through the appeal process without, you know, they'd just say, don't be ridiculous. You look at the rest of the houses around it, they're fine. So, you know, I think we've done the best that we possibly can in terms of the conditions, in terms of biodiversity, in terms of sustainability. And I think actually they're going to be attractive houses, and obviously, you know, the developer wouldn't build them unless they were sure that they could sell them for lots of money. We've all seen how much houses go for in Winchester. So I can't see any planning reasons why we can turn this down. And in fact, I do commend the developer for working with residents, for being so constructive and being prepared to change the design and look at landscaping and so on. So I welcome it, and thank you. Be supporting your recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Pearson.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I largely agree with what Councillor Rutter has said. I must admit my first reaction when I looked at the detailed plan on page 38 and page 39, this looks crumbs overdevelopment, is what Mr. Whitmarsh is suggesting. But that when you pull back and look at the pattern of housing in the area, which actually doesn't seem to be overdevelopment, because the distribution of houses, even with these two additional, is broadly the same on every site. Okay, there's usually one house in the site. Well, now there are two sites here, one house in each one, each of which has got a garden, each of which is going to be landscaped with, hopefully this landscaping suggestion here is carried through. As I head to the agents, I mean, because the mature vegetation is going to help any fears, I think, of overlooking. I sometimes have this sort of imagination with overlooking. People with a pair of binoculars looking at a neighbouring house and watching people with a pair of binoculars looking back at them. But of course, that's ridiculous. It doesn't happen. But no, I can't. I think it'd be rather perverse if we turned this one down, quite frankly. So I go along with Megan's suggestion, which, other than that, I don't like that one. But that's the reality for the future. That's the way it is.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to contribute? Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Chair. I think nobody likes infill sites. Infill sites always cause some concerns amongst the residents close by. This is one occasion when it exactly the same again. The reason I asked the question about the pitch of roof was the fact that if you look at page 42, because the two new dwellings are proposed dwellings are coloured, it looks as though the roof is quite large, and it is larger than other roofs around it. But nonetheless, it's the colouring, I think, which leads to the fact that it makes it look taller. I agree with most of what's been said already. But what I would like to say is that when we put conditions, I hope we are prepared to enforce them and don't put conditions that are unenforceable down. But I can't see any planning reason to refuse this application.
Thank you. Any further contributions? So this application has been recommended for approval. Our update sheets have a few changes or updates. So condition 2, the species has been changed from bleached lime to bleached patina red robin, which looks particularly nice at this time of year everywhere. And then there's a revised condition 2. I won't read it all out. And then there's obviously a typo in condition 4, an extra and that's in heavy print on the page, over the page. I think that was it. Oh yes, and then condition 5 has been changed to ensure that all bathroom windows, excluding roof lights, shall be glazed. So with those changes to the conditions, could I have those councillors who will vote with approval of this application?
That's 9 unanimous, Chair.
So that's everybody, isn't it? Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming along. Members of the public, you're very welcome to stay, but I'm sure you've got more interesting things to do. And we move on then, well, once we've changed officers to condition 7. Request for a break. So would you like a break? Yes. So what's your... Okay, thank you. It's very difficult to keep looking at that clock. It's 25 past, so shall we say, I don't know, 22? 22. So we're going to move on to item 7, which is 22/00640/FUL street record Uplands Road in Denmead. And it's for 2 custom self-built dwellings with associated driveways. And Jordan, you're taking over the case, Jordan Wiseman. So when you're ready, Jordan, we're ready to hear your presentation.
Thank you, Chair. So the proposal is for 2 custom self-built dwellings with associated driveways. The first slide here shows the site with a red star on the application site itself. This next slide is the location plan, which shows the site's boundaries outlined in red and its access onto the adjacent highway. Here you can see the proposed site plan, which shows the 2 individual plots with their access and associated driveways with gardens to the rear. Here are some site photos looking across the site in both directions, from east to west and west to east. We have the proposed street scene, which shows how the proposed dwellings would look from the street. You can see the tops of the proposed dwellings just sit above the hedging along there. So next slide is the proposed elevations for the proposed dwellings. The north and east elevations along the top and the west and south elevations along the bottom. And the proposed attached garage elevations with the front and side elevations at the top, the rear and other side elevation at the bottom, and the floor plan and roof plan below that. This is the proposed floor plan showing the layout of the property. It's 3 bedrooms. That concludes the presentation for this item. The recommendation is to refuse because it is residential development outside of the settlement boundary, and it's noted that one of the applicant's justifications for this development is that it is self-built, and the council is currently meeting its statutory duty in permitting self-built plots, as confirmed in a recent appeal decision in 2022 in December, as referred to throughout the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So we have one public speaker, who's Margaret Bentley, and I believe you're the applicant as well, supporter and applicant. Good morning. So there's a microphone in front of you, and at the bottom is a button to press. Red light comes on.
Thank you.
And when you're ready, the clock will start. You have 3 minutes, and you'll be able to see it on the screen.
Thank you. Next slide, please. My name is Margaret Bentley. I knew that my land was outside what is known as the settlement boundary, but I applied for permission to build because of Richard Bacon's review of custom and self-build and the 15-minute neighbourhood concept. The settlement boundary has been drawn around existing dwellings and is expanded when large developments get the green light to build. Winchester City Council Regulation 18 consultation plan states land will be allocated for development in the Denmead neighbourhood plan for about 100 dwellings, including any required amendments to the settlement boundary. There is a planned development of about 100 houses east of Inham's Lane, which is off School Lane, and my land is off School Lane. Access to my land is either from my gate in School Lane or from Uplands Road. The independent examiner, Christopher Collison, produced a report for the current Denmead Neighbourhood Plan. His findings were the plan does not meet the wishes of the majority, who said they prefer several smaller developments spread around the village. Denmead Neighbourhood Plan Steering Group agrees with this. Their note, dated the 6th of February 2023, says the group would prefer smaller sites of 10 dwellings or less rather than one large site. 10% of any allocation would be smaller sites. The fairest way to plan a boundary has been written by Winchester City Council. The Regulation 18 consultation plan states the local plan needs to create and support communities where people can undertake journeys by foot or cycle to local shops and community facilities within 15 minutes of their home. My land is well within your boundary, being a 9-minute cycle ride to the church in Denmead Village. My plan is well considered and in keeping with the surrounding properties, takes into account the surrounding environment and looks to minimise environmental impact. The PEA says there will be a biodiversity net gain. I ask you to give me your permission to build my high quality, efficient, eco-friendly, self-build bungalows in a sustainable location within the boundary criteria set by Winchester City Council. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And it could be that there are some questions of clarification for you from the committee. Could I ask you, Ms. Bentley, is this the next application is the next plot along? Is that just by chance or?
Mr. Benfield, Ashley's father, we're neighbours in our street as well as neighbours on our land, and we've been friends for many years. So
I see. Right, thank you. Members, any other questions? No, so thank you very much for coming along today. Jordan, anything you want to pick up from Ms. Bentley's presentation?
No, thank you, Chair.
Okay, so we'll go to the report. This has been recommended for refusal. So the first heading is the reasons for recommendation. In fact, it is quite a short report, so we'll have questions on anything, perhaps. Councillor Atchwell, did you want to speak? No. So Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Chair. I think it was 2 months ago we had an application for other self-builds in approximately the same location. Could the officer please identify where that location was in comparison to this one?
Yes, it was along School Lane. It was 2 or 3 plots down the road. I don't have the plan in front of me.
Dawn, did you want to update?
No, it's on.
Oh, right, yeah, okay.
So if you can see the screen, yeah. The other plot was along School Lane, sort of around this plot here. From memory, that's not exact, but it was in that thereabouts. If that helps.
I believe that application was refused. Any other questions? So I did open it up to questions on anything. Does anyone want to ask any questions at all? Councillor Rutter.
Yes, could you just clarify for me, please, Jordan, exactly where the settlement boundary is around Denmead? Does it reach that map that we're looking at on the screen, or is it further away than that?
I don't have the assessment boundary on this presentation, but the site itself falls outside the assessment boundary by a distance. As I say, without assessment boundary in front of me, I'm not able to show you on the screen. All I can say is it is outside the assessment boundary by some distance.
Corner's just showing me the settlement boundary. I believe it's quite a long way out of the settlement boundary. The case officer's just looking at the settlement boundary.
It's off the page. Yeah, it's off.
We've got the ward councillor coming up now to help out. Yes, so the case officer is indicating to the committee that it's actually quite a long way outside the settlement boundary. Councillor Pearson.
Yeah, it's related to the self-bills and whatever. May I ask, are there any actual local plan policies that allow self-built housing to be built outside the developed boundary, for example, as an exception site or a replacement for a previous dwelling? Because neither of those seem to fit this situation. So, I mean, are there any situations where it could be, or is it simply a non-starter? Because I noticed they didn't consult planning officers in the first place. I'm saying they, it seems all three of these seem to be almost exactly the same.
Yeah, so if the site had a dwelling on there existing and they wish to replace an existing dwelling with a self-built dwelling, in principle that would be okay because there was a dwelling there in the first instance. At the moment, there are no policies in the current local plan which would allow for exceptions for self-builds outside of the settlement boundary.
So effectively, sorry, I have my mic switch on then. So effectively what you're saying is that it's a dead duck from the word go.
The principal development isn't
Perhaps
acceptable.
not using that phraseology, but
yes, essentially the principal development isn't acceptable because it's outside the settlement boundary.
yeah, that's what I understood. Thank you.
And Councillor Pearson, if you look at the paragraph under relevant planning history, it's a different area, sure, Heath, but the appeal there for custom build plots, the inspector commented last sentence that there is evidence that the council is consistently meeting demand for self-bid plots. Any further? If not, then debate. Councillor Pearson.
Well, I think Chairman, our previous comments have almost summed it up, that there's nothing in the local plans that allowed any building with that are outside the exceptions we've just mentioned, basically the countryside. The whole idea of development boundaries is to stop urban sprawl. And if we don't keep to that pretty tight regime, even when there's less and less space within the developed boundary, and which tends, in my opinion, to raise the cost of the housing inside the developed boundary. So even that, no matter how good the development is, we've had one or two examples of been very good developments. I can't see any any reason to grant planning permission. It's not an exception site, to reiterate. It's not a replacement of existing buildings. It's outside the development boundary. The whole intention of that is to stop urban sprawl. So even though it may be self-built, which is a plus factor, it just doesn't fit our local plans, full stop, and that's it. I'm sorry, actually, that Mr. Bentley didn't discuss with the office beforehand. She might have saved money if she had done. I mean, it's as simple as that.
Councillor Rutter.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Pearson, of course. Yes, I agree entirely. And if I could just add, a self-built house is still a house, and a self-built house in the countryside is still a new house in the countryside. And I'm afraid our local plan has very strong policies to discourage new houses being built in the countryside without completely overriding reasons which are to do with agriculture and exception sites and so on, as Councillor Pearson pointed out. So I'm afraid that, you know, there is no way under our local plan that we could possibly accept this application, even if they were the best houses in the world and the most ecologically wonderful and sustainable and everything else. They are not within our planning policies. We cannot support your application. I'm very sorry. Please find a site that's within the settlement boundary. Thank you.
Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Chair. As already shown from the previous 2 months ago, I think it was, there were 4 properties self-build planned for that site. This is a further 2, and the next application is a further 2, which is a whole ribbon of development within the countryside. One property is not favourable, as already been discussed. It's the Denmead itself does the neighbourhood plan, and it has ever since it started. And it's the Denmead people that residents or prospective builders wish to go and see. The self-build concept is reappearing again, because if you think back, it was about 30, 40 years ago that we had a massive self-build programs going around the country. That died right down. It's now come up again, and I think the new local plan, which is in production at the moment, will actually cover some of it. But as I say, the Denmead neighbourhood plan is part of the local plan, the Winchester local plan. So it's the Denmead parish that needs to be convinced somehow that this is a viable scheme. This is against our policies, and I will continue to vote in that order. Thank you.
Thank you. And I would just add that we have, according to the update sheet, we have added in the Denmead neighbourhood plan, and there will be the policies inserted into that as well as one of the reasons for refusal. And we saw when we looked at the map, which the case officer held up, this is really countryside, and we must protect our countryside, not allow, as Councillor Reid said, ribbon development along this strip of land. So I can see no justification at all, and I'm sorry for permitting this application. So if there are no further comments, this application has been recommended for refusal, and the reason for refusal is, and there is an update on our update sheet, and saying it's contrary to all these policies and the Denmead local plan, the neighbourhood plan they call it, which would result in new dwellings outside of defined settlement boundary in a countryside location with no justification. All those in agreement with that reason for refusal, please show.
Not unanimous for refusal, Chair. Thanks.
Thank you. So that is unanimous. So that application is refused. And we move on then to the next application, which is number 8 on our agenda. On the page 87. Thank you. I have got paper clips in, but they've fallen out. Oh no, they haven't fallen out. Anyway, this is 22/00649/FUL, erection of 2 self-built dwellings, street record, Uplands Road, Denmead. I don't think I need to say any more. Jordan, you're the case officer for this as well. So when you're ready, Jordan, we're ready to hear your presentation.
Thank you, Chair. So the proposal is for 2 custom self-built dwellings with associated driveways. This first slide shows an aerial image of the site with the red star on there indicating the site itself. This next slide shows the site boundaries outlined in red with its access onto the highway adjacent. This slide, it shows the site plan with the proposed layouts and plots for the 2 properties with their associated access and gardens to the rear. These are the site photos looking across the site from east to west and west to east. This slide is the proposed street scene from the street showing the properties. Again, you can see the roofs pop up just above the hedge. Next slide is the proposed elevations for this site. Both the elevations at the top and the bottom